Grand Prix of Spain from Barcelona. There's Michael Schumacher on pole for the second straight race and second of his career, going for his 5th consecutive victory to open the season.
Standing alongside Johan Villadel-Pratt to the left, and there Pat Simmons, who would later become technical director after Ross Brawn moved on to Ferrari. There, sitting in the Williams, Damon Hill. Look at those eyes.
I was going to say, Damon Hill looking pretty serious. This is only his 23rd start.
There's Mika Hakkinen, who will become a 2-time Formula One world champion in the future. For now, he was wrestling with the recalcitrant Peugeot V10 engine. Look at the starting grid. Schumacher on pole, Damon Hill alongside. It's been a while since Hill had sat on pole position. Leto and Hakkinen on row 2. Jean Alesi and Rubens Barrichello. Good qualifying performance for Barrichello. In fact, the best of his career to that point.
And Martin Brundle and Gerhard Berger in the second Ferrari, Kalle Armour and Coulthard making his Grand Prix debut in the second Williams, replacing Ayrton Senna.
Back in 13th place, Eddie Irvine, having finished up his ban for causing the accident that marred the Brazilian Grand Prix, was back in the Jordan. Johnny Herbert in the Mugen-powered Lotus. That's the Lotus 109. Debut for that new car.
And Zanardi there and the 2-year-old Lotus, not that much slower really. So
Alex Zanardi back with the team for the first time since his big crash at Spa-Francorchamps in Belgium the previous season. He was in replacing Pedro Lamy, who also had a massive crash, but in testing at Silverstone, in which he went over the trackside fence and wound up sitting in the monocoque in a spectator tunnel. Fortunately, obviously, nobody there on a test day.
Yes, and that accident, Lamy's accident, a result of those vibrations coursing through the car, direct result of the diffuser modifications.
So once again, a massive crash affected Formula One.
Yeah.
And a massive crash from what Steve was just saying, if I get your implication right, they're brought about by the sudden change of regulations from one race to the next.
Absolutely.
And in fact, there was a huge crash here in Barcelona. Andrea Montermini in his Simtech had a heavy accident, hitting the wall off the final corner, leading onto the front straightaway and suffering broken bones.
How he didn't lose his feet is an absolute miracle, because as the car came to rest, the front of the chassis had been ripped off and the driver's feet actually poking through the chassis, but fortunately no real serious damage as a result.
And of course that is a very fast corner,
yeah,
that last corner here.
We'll see it in just a moment as the field makes its way around through the Seat corner down to Berth. And then an uphill left-hander.
To try and slow the cars here. Remember then, the FIA had built a temporary chicane with tyres to try and slow the cars.
There you see the one and only Sauber in the race. They chose not to enter a second car. Carl Wendlinger still trying to recover. There's the chicane that Steve mentioned.
Ugly looking brute, isn't it?
Yeah. But you'll notice if we see the Sauber up close, Heinz-Harald Frentzen has a very bulky cockpit head restraint on the car.
Well, those head restraints, Bob, now, of course, are mandatory throughout the sport, but it was Sauber responding to what had happened in Monaco, and very credible it was too.
Now, this is Olivier Beretta in the La Rousse, who has lost the engine on the formation lap. How embarrassing.
Well, the Ford HB-V8 just letting go. A great shame. Imagine all the work, the preparation work, getting everything ready for this moment, the start of the race, and the thing doesn't even get it into the grid.
Oh,
yep.
What a disappointment.
That's motor racing right there.
Yeah, I know. It's a bit of motor racing I never particularly became acclimatized to.
Back of your screen is that fast corner where Montermini had his accident.
Very spectacular setting, the Barcelona Grand Prix. Amazing grandstands, garage area, press room. The whole thing is incredible, and it's improved a lot since then too.
Yeah. Circuit de Catalunya, extreme northeastern Spain. Schumacher on pole, Hill alongside. Here we go.
Good start from Schumacher and Mika Hakkinen.
And I actually say a poor start from the Williams, Damon Hill.
Gerhard Berger up there too. Both Ferraris up there, one each side of the track.
Hill slots in behind Schumacher down in turn 1, and then a quick left-hander.
Somehow they weaved their way through there.
This track, chaps, a complete contrast to where we were at the previous race at Monaco. Very wide and sweeping open corners here. Cars carrying nowhere near the amount of downforce that they were in Monaco. Those big rear wings gone now, you see. That's not a result of any regulation change. That's just the need to strip the downforce off the car to maximise the straight line speed.
Brundle made up a few positions. Now running behind Rubens Barrichello in the Jordan. Coulthard picked up 3 spots from 9th to 6th. Schumacher drawing away from Hill and Hakkinen.
Mika Hakkinen hanging on to Damon Hill though, pretty much. Wow, look at the lead already.
Lacey, Leto, and Coulthard, 4th, 5th, and 6th.
Gerhard Berger lost a lot of ground on that in that first lot shuffle somewhere. He was coming right along into turn 1, but he lost a lot of ground.
This is that final corner, launching onto the front straight. So the tire barrier to the left where Montermini augured in.
See, the cars were probably faster down the main straight here as well. I mean, all the cars, due to this regulation change, to strip about 150 mil off the rear of the diffuser. That's the panel, the arch panel between the rear wheels underneath the car that creates the downforce. Well, the teams reckon they'd lost about 25 to 30% overall downforce by that modification. They're bound to be going quicker down the straights.
Yeah.
Of course, that takes away from the balance of the car.
Absolutely.
Hill and Hakkinen.
Damon Hill seems to have stretched out a fairly comfortable lead now over Hakkinen, or at least he's got away from Hakkinen, was breathing right down his neck on that opening lap. And John Lacey's coming back into the frame now. Schumacher pulling away from all of them.
Local yellow flag there for a car off the track.
That's the Beretta car. There's that awful chicane.
Yeah.
Well, you can't sight your way through there at all.
Bertrand Gachot, the only car to strike that tire wall chicane in practice leading up to the race. Another look at the start. Great start for Schumacher.
JJ Loto seemed to make a little bit too much of a good start. I think it was creeping forward, wasn't he?
Perhaps just that little bit as the ground comes to its feet. Down to turn 1 they go. Good look at Damon Hill, a future world champion. We'll be back to F1 Decade. Welcome back to the 1994 Spanish Grand Prix. There's the silver Pacific of Paul Belmondo, and there is the Frenchman going off backwards.
Well into the beach there.
Michael Schumacher rocketing away from his 2nd career pole into the race lead, looking for his 5th consecutive victory to open the 94 season.
Boy, that chicane was horrible to me. How they weaved their way through there, I can't imagine.
I was struck by the pace Schumacher went through it
The
at.
way the car reacted.
Oh my gosh.
Absolutely.
There's Michele Alboreto.
That would be another Ford HB problem in the Minardi. So that's the 2nd Ford HB retirement of the race so far. Not a good day for Cosworth.
On board with Mika Hakkinen in the McLaren Peugeot.
Still hanging doggedly onto Damon Hill in the Williams. Oh, look at just a good look at what you can't see.
Threading the needle at about 75 miles an hour or so.
Well, it certainly wasn't a popular modification. That a lot of the drivers were very unhappy about it. But he did stop in, as we see, for the race itself, on board with JJ Leto.
5th place.
Up there just in front of him as they go up through the Bank de Sabadell corner. Long right-hander, then the road starts to drop away. Quick right-hander, bit of a lift here, and then this is that last turn we're talking about.
You There's some empty seats in the grandstands. Formula One and Spain had a bit of a love-hate relationship for a long time. If it were a Grand Prix motorcycle race, they'd be packed. We'll be back. To the 1994 Spanish Grand Prix at Barcelona, round 5 of the 1994 Formula One season here on F1 Decade. I'm Bob Barsha with David Hobbs and Steve Matchett. Jean Alesi leads J.J. Leto and David Coulthard, and here's Mika Hakkinen pitting from 3rd place.
And a very quick McLaren pit stop there.
So the 3 men we just saw, Alesi, Leto, and Coulthard, move up to 3rd, 4th, and 5th.
David Coulthard having a great start to his Formula One career there, hanging right on to those cars.
McLaren's very quick pit stop, as you said, Dave. What they were doing to increase the pace of their pit stops, they're actually letting the car down onto the ground before the fuel hose is out. It's probably not the safest way of doing it, because then if any problems with the clutch, the car will lurch forward before the fuel hose is off. But there's no question it is the quickest way to do the stop.
But now you just said that, it sounds horribly hairy to me. This is LEGKISEBB. Right left-hander up the hill.
And now from Jean Alesi's car. I forgot what true slick tires look like on Formula One cars.
Bring them back, I say.
Look at there, brother. Here's David Coulthard hitting from 5th.
It's great for those onboards to see the tyre, the way the tyre changes across the tyre as it goes through the corners, and it changes each corner, and down the straight's different again. Because you still see it today with the tread.
David Coulthard stalled the car. Now remember, of course, this is David Coulthard's first race for Williams, being promoted from test driver. David Coulthard, of course, taking over from Ayrton Senna in the car. Remember, they only fielded 1 car in Monaco. So this is David Coulthard's big break.
Why wouldn't they have
to fill too?
Why wouldn't they have the auxiliary starter right there in the pit lane on every start? It looked like they had to scramble to get it.
Well, it would. They've stalled again. Yeah, problems with the clutch. But to answer your question, Bob, they will have it ready. They're just not as slick as some teams. That's the answer, I'm afraid.
Alesi and Leto battling for 3rd as you take a look at Eric Bernard and his Ligier.
These two are having a very stout battle. We just had that great onboard with J.J. Leto. Unfortunately, David Coulthard no longer a part of this. There he goes, but now, by now, he's almost a lap down on that race.
A little bit of anger there, and then tire squeal. Ukio Katayama in the Tyrrell, done. Meanwhile, here's Martin Brundle pitting the McLaren from 6th place.
You said earlier on, David Hobbs, it is hair-raising to see that car with the fuel hose on. The driver desperately trying to snatch the clutches. Yeah. But it's quick.
The old fuel had been dragged down the road, still attached to the car.
Well, we've seen that a couple of times since then, haven't we?
Yeah.
There's Leto pitting from 4th.
So that battle, which was going really well, broken up now completely. Jean Alesi, meanwhile, is still out.
Now you'll see Benetton airing on the side of caution with their pit stops, and that's how we used to do it then. We used to leave the car in the air until the refueling hose had come off to prevent any possibility of the driver pulling off with the fuel hose connected.
Eddie Irvine makes his pit stop from 12th.
It was the safest way to do it, but I have to say, guys, we nevertheless changed our procedures. We saw how quick the other teams were starting to perform.
Did you really? So you want that hair-raising?
Yeah, I'm afraid we did.
So you sacrificed that measure of safety in order to get another split second off
performance. Yeah. It probably saved a fraction of a second, but that is Formula One right there. I wouldn't say I approve of it, but that's what it is.
Jean Alesi, the traditional Ferrari red. It's gotten a bit more orange in recent years. Damon Hill pits from second.
That camera is actually mounted on the refueling nozzle.
On the nozzle?
Yeah, on the nozzle itself, I think. On the nozzle or on his helmet? I think it was on the nozzle.
He's going by on the racetrack. Here comes Mika Hakkinen in the red and white McLaren. Flashing by, Damon Hill rejoins in fourth. There's David Coulthard. Lazy pits the 27. Screaming V12 Ferrari.
There's our race leader, Michael Schumacher. He's been struggling a little bit at that point.
Going very quickly.
Now on the right you see Jos Verstappen.
No,
It is civilians, yeah, still wearing a race shirt. Remember, he started the race season covering for JJ Leto. Now, Schumacher's transmission stuck in fifth gear at this point. The guys deciding to come in. We need to refuel the car, but remember, at this point, the car is stuck in fifth gear. And we were all thinking, how is he going to be able to drive out of the pits in fifth gear? This from this point on, just a slight hesitation. You heard the engine note, very low down, trying to pull away. From now on until the end of the race, bear this in mind, that car is stuck in fifth gear.
And look how it compromises his acceleration too.
Johnny Herbert came in behind him
at all, but of course, unfortunately, when he got up to speed, Johnny Herbert still couldn't quite take advantage of it because he couldn't overtake him in pit lane there or cross that white line.
It was one of the very rare mechanical failures on the B194's transmission. It was a hydraulic problem. Michael radioed in, said he's stuck in fifth gear, what should we do? The team announced that we couldn't do anything, Michael. You carry on if you think you can race the car safely. Michael said, do we need to pit for fuel? Yes, you need to pit for fuel. Quite remarkable.
What you're about to see is one of the great drives in Formula One history.
And of course, Michael Schumacher was subsequently have another incredible drive here in the pouring rain. When at some stage, just 2 years later, he's lapping 3 to 5 seconds quicker than the other people. There you see the running order. We'll be right back with more in just a moment. Stay with us.
Welcome back to the 1994 Spanish Grand Prix here on F1 Decade. There is Michael Schumacher, race leader, but his Benetton Ford is stuck in fifth gear. And looming up behind him, as you look at David Coulthard there, Schumacher with Mika Hakkinen in the red and white McLaren about to go by for the race lead.
It's important to remember at this point that Michael Schumacher in fifth gear, and only that one gear, is still leading the Grand Prix at this point.
Well, until Hakkinen got him right there.
Right there, yeah.
But I mean, those corners there are all corners where you need multiple gear changes. You know, third, fourth, fifth, back to third again.
Listen to the sound of the engine.
Now, keep your eye on the telemetry, in the green circle, the number 5, that's the gear.
Look how low the revs are going.
Yeah.
So remember, the clutch didn't just explode.
Well, the clutch is okay as long as it's stuck in fifth, but when he leaves the pits, it goes a tremendous strain on the clutch.
Yeah.
And of course, here he must have to back off going down the straight. Because he'd normally want to take another gear here.
Right, so he has to watch his revs.
So he has to feather it. Which means he's very compromised on the straight.
Steve, during this episode, was the team giving him gaps to those behind?
Yes, they were on the radio to him a lot. How Michael was coping with this afterwards, he explained to the team that with his experience in sports car days, running with the Mercedes Group C cars and having to figure out how to conserve fuel, Schumacher got a lot of experience of trying different racing lines around the circuit to reduce fuel consumption to the absolute minimum. We looked at the telemetry after the race, and sure enough, as a byproduct of Schumacher trying these different racing lines, the fuel economy actually did improve on the B194 around this track as a result of him trying different racing lines.
And of course, he probably ran in the higher gears as much as possible to keep the revs down and, again, help with fuel consumption.
There we just see Damon Hill. We're on board with Hill. taking Schumacher for second, back on board the stricken B194.
It was Group C. I was taking part of that just right around that time, and of course you had to try and stretch your fuel enormously, so you did take these funny lines, and obviously gear shifting was cut to a minimum.
Two things helped us out really with the result that we managed to pull out of this race. One was the great torque of the Ford V8 engine. The Cosworth had a lot of torque, which allowed the car to drive out of the corners, and also by fluke, when the hydraulic problem occurred on the transmission, the transmission was in fifth. If it was in a higher gear, sixth, we wouldn't have been able to drive out of those low corners. And of course, if it was stuck in a lower gear, third or second, you wouldn't have had any performance at all, I would think. So it's clouds and silver lining in a way. But having said that, it's just the remarkable driving ability of Michael Schumacher which saved the day. So
you think it took him all this time for Damon Hill to finally get second away from him, and he's still leading his teammate.
Yeah, absolutely. In an FW16 car, which is performing perfectly.
There's Gianni Morbidelli and the footwork being pushed back into the garage. He was running in fifth on that last graphic. He's now out of the race. That's Mika Häkkinen, exposed right down to his collarbone in the Grand Prix cars of 1994. Häkkinen goes past David Coulthard, the Scotsman making his debut for the Williams team. In 1994 was a great Grand Prix mix of V8s, V10s, and V12s. Mika Häkkinen out front in that Peugeot V10 powered McLaren. Stay with us. We'll be back to Spain in a moment. Welcome back to the Circuit de Catalunya in Barcelona, Spain. Round 5 of the 1994 Formula One World Championship here on F1 Decade. I'm Bob Barsha with Steve Matchett and David Hobbs. There's Mika Häkkinen, the race leader. His cars flash down that long front straightaway. This is the battle for fifth. Jean Alesi leads Martin Brundle right there. Brundle coming in off a podium the previous round in Monaco.
Alesi's Ferrari, the number 27, carrying those distinctive bright yellow markings. It was a Ferrari tradition at the time, the 27 car. That is the 28 car of Gerhard Berger, out with transmission failure.
That's the way we saw Berger at the end of Monaco. Right. Stopped on the front straight, climbed out, looked at the back of the car. Brundle all over Alesi. Race leader Häkkinen is in. Steve, I noticed your Benetton jack was the handheld model. Notice the McLaren boys using a pneumatically operated jack.
McLaren eventually gave up on that because it was too slow. Williams persisted for a long while. I think they too eventually gave up on it, but it's one of those F1 traditions. It needs another team to take the advantage, and everybody will copy.
So the running order is now that man, Damon Hill, with an 11-second lead over Michael Schumacher, stuck in fifth gear but running in second place. Häkkinen comes out in third.
Isn't that amazing? He's stuck in fifth place as fifth gear and still managed to overtake Häkkinen in his pit stop. So I'm no doubt Häkkinen will be able to whistle by him again now, but I mean, it's pretty incredible.
David Coulthard, he would retire from his first Grand Prix with Williams because of electronic problems.
A very young David Coulthard, might keep pressing this point.
They look like teenagers.
Again, on board with Michael Schumacher.
All uphill. Now this is level and then starts down.
Closing in on Damon Hill in spite of there's a deranged rear wing on Bertrand Gachot's car
in the Pacific. And look, they're still running that extra downforce on that rear wing of the Pacific. I think basically because they'd lost that diffuser downforce and they were trying to claw as much back as they could.
Christian Fittipaldi out about the same time. Mark Blundell hits the Yamaha. Tyrrell Yamaha. show, of course, the man whose place was taken in the Jordan team by Michael Schumacher at Spa-Francorchamps. Recently, Bertrand Gachot said, "I'll take a little bit of the credit for giving Michael Schumacher his first opportunity." Of course, Gachot did that by being arrested in England for spraying mace on a cab driver. Lazy pits from 6th place. Eddie Irvine flashes around him. There's his teammate, Rubens Barrichello. His beautiful South African oil company sponsored Jordan Hearts.
Rubens Barrichello done well. He qualified in 5th here, whereas Eddie Irvine qualified back in 13th. But was certainly making ground up on his teammate during the race.
Well, there's one of those quick mechanical front jacks you were talking about, Bob, in comparison to how McLaren still using that old pneumatic system. It was definitely the future.
Damon Hill pits from the race lead. And now Schumacher and Hakkinen will be doing all they can to get around before he can get back out.
The technique of the gun guys is interesting to watch. The key to getting a quick time out of the pit stop is to have the gun on the wheel nut before the car comes to a complete stop.
You saw that mechanic leaning in as the car
sort of following the car into its stop position.
Barrichello's Hart V10 gives up the ghost.
Oh.
Meanwhile, Michael Schumacher retakes the race lead. Mika Hakkinen is 2nd, and Damon Hill comes out in 3rd.
Of course, this is where it must be very difficult. I mean, he got around that lap car there, but, you know, he just has got no oomph when he needs it.
So Michael Schumacher driving with 5th gear only in that Ford V8 powered Benetton is in the race lead. A phenomenal performance. But the question is, how long can it go on? Look at him carrying speed through the corner and using all of the track.
Using him really carrying speed through there, going very wide, slightly different line. This must be difficult going through here too, because you want to carry speed in to keep it up on the way out. But
was there ever a better example of a driver adapting his driving style to suit the conditions, and he gets a little squirrely there as he tries to carry that speed and help the engine. Once again, Michael Schumacher doing everything he can to win this race. Back to the 1994 Spanish Grand Prix here on F1 Decade. Bob Varsha along with Steve Matchett and David Hobbs. You're watching Mika Hakkinen in 2nd place in the race, and he dives for the pit lane. Once again, the McLaren crew awaits their man. Michael Schumacher pits up ahead. Keep in mind, only 5th gear.
And keep in mind that that right foot, just right under our camera nose, is sitting right next to me right now. And it looks as ugly now as it did then.
Thank you, Mr. Hobbs.
So Schumacher gets back out in front of Mika Hakkinen. So Damon Hill takes over the race lead. Schumacher is 2nd, Hakkinen 3rd. There's Hill. His teammate David Coulthard has already retired. Would the Williams team have known at this point, Steve, that Schumacher was dealing with a car stuck in 5th gear?
Yes, they did know by virtue of the telemetry that we've been seeing off the world feed. All the engineers on the pit wall are watching that same world feed as well, and they will have picked up instantly the fact, with the onboard shots as well, that we had problems with our transmission. All the teams try and hide any weaknesses as much as possible, because you never want to give an advantage or a potential advantage to the opposition. Equally, all the teams are watching each other like hawks to pick up on any potential weak spot.
That is the gap. After he's just had a pit stop, Schumacher's just had a pit stop, Damon Hill has not, and he's still only 5 seconds behind.
So up and down the pit lane, they're wondering, just as we are, how in the world does this man do it? Michael Schumacher, 2nd, as the laps tick away in Spain.
Welcome back to F1 Decade. Michael Schumacher, with his Benetton Ford stuck in 5th gear, is about to fall into the clutches of the entirely healthy McLaren Peugeot in the hands of future world champion Mika Häkkinen. Damon Hill is the race leader. There goes Schumacher, and here comes the Finn.
That quick corner again. They look like rocks on the end of a piece of string when they come around here, don't they? It's just unbelievable.
They do.
They grip. I mean, you can't believe it.
That's a great description, David Hobbs.
Like Roger Daltrey of The Who swinging his microphone.
The gap coming down to 2.9, but of course, like you said, a healthy. Whoa! Healthy.
Not
spoke too soon.
Spoke too soon. Did a mighty walk on him.
Oh, there he goes.
That's comprehensive.
Very comprehensive. Mika Häkkinen's engine blows. That really takes a huge amount of pressure now off Michael Schumacher.
Fortunately, it looks like he got it off the racing line in plenty of time.
Well, disappointing that for McLaren, because they'd had all sorts of problems with that Peugeot A6 V10, but they seem to have got on top of it, because this is a very demanding track-on engine, full throttle for a lot of the time, but yeah, well, it wasn't to be. Good news for Benetton, of course, but not for McLaren.
As the heat was off, Michael Schumacher in a fairly safe podium position, 2nd place, if that car would hold out for the finish.
Only 7%, and of course there's his teammate JJ Leto, who's still half a minute behind. I assume at that stage that Flavio wouldn't let him overtake him anyway.
Right.
There's your race leader. Renault V10 in the back of the Williams for Damon Hill. That was always a great sounding engine.
Yes.
A look there at the Williams team leader. Here's JJ Leto pitting from 3rd.
Now, keep your eye on the guy that's working inside the cockpit there on the left of the screen. You'll see him trying to connect a hose. JJ Leto's telemetry reporting that the pressure, the pneumatic pressure controlling the valve system started to drop in the Ford HB V8. So all we're trying to do in the pit stops, as we've seen Bernard run wide, is trying to top up the pressure to see if we can get that V8 engine to last the race distance in Leto's car.
Damon pulling out just a little bit more of a lead over Michael Schumacher.
To the left of your screen, there is Leto climbing out.
Yeah, it didn't work. That pneumatic valve system uses compressed air as opposed to a coiled valve spring. There at the top of the screen, you're going to see Leto pull off. And as soon as that pressure drops, effectively, the valves are unable to reseal themselves and game over.
That was a technology brought to Formula One by Renault, as I recall.
Absolutely. Yep, and current on every Formula One engine up and down the pit lane to this day.
As the steel springs couldn't keep up with the speed of these engines, revving up to 17,000 or so RPM at this point, maybe 18,000 in '94.
It was relatively new technology, certainly to Ford at that period, and they were still very much in a learning period. Now, it's pretty much a sorted technology and has become, as I say, standard throughout the industry.
It's amazing to me how they top those tanks up before the race. There you see that gap, 7.7 seconds. It's staying about the same, but it's, you know, close to 8 seconds in front for Damon Hill. It's amazing to me how those tanks hold that pressure for the entire race. When you think how many times those valves go up and down in the course of a race at 19,000 RPM, and they manage to hold the pressure.
Yeah.
There's Schumacher coming around to put a lap on the Simtek. My goodness. Being lapped by a man whose car is stuck in 5th gear. Hill and Schumacher with Martin Brundle at distant 3rd. We'll be back with more from Spain. Welcome back to the 1994 Spanish Grand Prix here on F1 Decade with Steve Matchett, a Benetton mechanic at the time, and David Hobbs. I'm Bob Varsha. There is race leader Damon Hill with a small gap over Michael Schumacher, whose Benetton Ford is stuck in 5th gear and has been for most of the race, yet he remains in 2nd place.
Oh, but there's Martin Brundle off at the end of the straight there. Smoke coming out from underneath. Obviously had some sort of minor incident with the engine by the look of things.
Let's have a look at the replay and see. Whoa! Kurt Blammo! Well, it doesn't get better than that, does it?
All that bodywork flying out there, all bits of bodywork flying everywhere as well.
When they go wrong, they look at that. They really go wrong.
Oh, now he's laying a lot of oil down there, I'd imagine, right into the braking zone for turn one. That could be a bit hair-raising for anybody coming on the scene.
Very impressive.
Wow. Yes, that is now that's a blow-up.
So both McLaren Peugeots out of the race, both in fairly spectacular fashion.
And both very, I mean, Mika Hakkinen enough chance to win, and poor old Martin Brundle in third spot there. So that's very disappointing for Ron Dennis and the gang.
So Mark Blundell moves up into third in the Tyrrell Yamaha. Jean Alesi in the Ferrari is fourth. Pierluigi Martini in the Minardi in fifth place, and Eddie Irvine in the Jordan Hart in sixth.
Wow.
Now, Tyrrell managed to pick up some points here. Remember back to the 93 season, they went the entire 16 races without scoring a single championship point. This will be huge for Ken Tyrrell's team if they manage to pull this off.
Lunging downhill. Onto the front stretch. Checkered flag awaits, and Damon Hill celebrates, as does the Williams team. But the real story of this race was running in second place, and that is Michael Schumacher nursing that race car for most of the event in fifth gear and winding up on the second step of the podium.
Well, Damon Hill giving the usual victory air punch there, but I mean, boy oh boy, he should have won it by a lot more than 10 seconds.
A country mile. He should have won it by. Okay. Nevertheless, a great result for Williams. They certainly needed it.
This is Mark Blundell finishing in that third position for the modestly budgeted Tyrrell team.
Now he should be happy, because that was a pretty stout effort to get that car home in third. He qualified 11th.
And a big, big victory for the Williams team, coming just a couple of races after the tragedy at Imola, in which Ayrton Senna lost his life in a Williams Renault.
You just saw Damon Hill there toggling the radio switch on the steering wheel, obviously in conversation with the team. Yeah, they needed that.
The collar of his fire retardant suit flapping in the air kind of recalls his father Graham in the days when they would take bandanas and tie them around their necks. British flag for him to wave. Perhaps in this circumstance a Brazilian one might be useful. Jean Alesi fourth, followed by Pierluigi Martini and Eddie Irvine. Welcome back in Parc Fermé. Michael Schumacher on the right, Damon Hill on the left. What rivals they were in 1994.
They weren't to be looking quite so cheery towards the end of the season, that's the nature of it. That's kind of the matchup that we saw there. Michael Schumacher coming in absolutely brilliant second, in spite of being stuck in fifth gear mode. Mark Blundell there, great run for Tyrrell. Jean Alesi, not such a great run for Ferrari, but there he was. And there you see some of the retirees, Martin Brundle and Mika Hakkinen out with some of the best blow-ups you've ever seen. Rubens Barrichello, of course, we saw sliding up into that gravel trap big time.
Now a look at the championship. Michael Schumacher with 4 victories in 5 races and second in the 5th, with a dominant lead in the championship over Damon Hill and Gerhard Berger. In the Constructors' Championship, Benetton Ford enjoying a big lead over Ferrari and Williams Renault. There's Damon Hill on the podium with Schumacher at his elbow, and Mark Blundell still smiling. Looks like a little disbelief in Mark Blundell's eyes at being on the podium. Let's hear from the top 3.
This race was very important to do well, and to win was better, to be honest, was better than I expected to do. Michael put up as usual, and as to be expected, a tough fight. But this victory must go to everyone at Williams who have been through terrible times, and also to all the fans of Ayrton Senna who I met in Brazil, who said to me that they would be very pleased to see the Williams team do well. And so really to everyone, thank you very much.
Never would have imagined to finish that race, and then even in second position. I mean, for me, it's something like a victory. In the beginning, it was a bit difficult to run with this fifth gear through all the corners, but then I managed to find a good line and keep up the lap times, more or less to compete against the others that were behind me, not against Damon. It was too quick for me then.
It's been a tough year for me so far, and for the team, because I've put a lot of work in. It's great, Toro Yamaha, third position. First podium for Yamaha, scored the first point from back in '91, so that's good. And it's lovely to be back here again. I had it twice last year, and it's nice to come back.
Typical trademark too, Michael Schumacher there, not a bead of sweat on his face. Damon Hill absolutely dripping in it, and Mark Blundell looking pretty hot and bothered.
So the secret was out. The way to deal with Michael Schumacher was give him just one gear to go the distance. So that's the story of the '94 Spanish Grand Prix. Now once again.